Hey, did you know that you're more likely to be hit by lightning than killed by a shark?
Oh yeah, I've heard that one before.
And the animal that kills the most people in Australia every year is the horse?
I've never trusted them.
Oh, wow. And the Americans faked the moon landing just to prove their superiority over the Soviets.
Well, that's contentious.
I wonder if there are any other moon facts here.
Well, just be careful. There's some real weirdos out there trying to sell you pills and crystals and other junk, and they really latch onto stuff like that.
The moon isn't even real. It's a hologram. Which celestial bodies are holograms?
Walt, you have to check where this information is coming from. Not all websites are created equal. It's the internet. It's like the Wild West out there, man.
This page says that the whole moon hologram thing was made up.
Yeah, see? Like, good to know you're on the right side of the internet now.
Yeah, it says the whole thing is made of cheese.
Well, that's true, actually. Wensleydale. I did the hand thing.
That's what got me.
Wensleydale.
Wensleydale. You can't see it, but we're doing the Wallace from Wallace and Gromit fingers tingling thing.
If you actually got that reference before we told you it was Wallace and Gromit, you can come guest show on the podcast. You're on out here.
I'm wondering if the American listeners are aware of Wallace and Gromit. It seems like such an intensely British thing.
It is really British. Like like my dad, it always says like, "Don't forget the cheese, Gromit." Like constantly. It's like a bit of a thing in our house. But
it's funny because in Australia we get such a mix of American and British content, and I think we assume that the rest of the world is the same. But it's kind of unique in Australia, I think. Anyway, if you're an American listener, let us know if you've heard of and/or seen any Wallace and Gromit. I'm curious.
Well, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, probably the film. That was a pretty big film.
But let us know if you've seen the shorter animated ones, like the sort of 40 to 50 minute ones.
We have a podcast.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP, brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. Now, before we get to the transmission this week, I can see the green light is blinking really, really quickly today for some reason. I just did want to remind everyone that if you are enjoying the ridiculousness that is the Get Commanded podcast and want to support us, the best way to do it is, of course, at patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast. Go check it out. It's the best way to support what we do and keep us making stuff and things and get rewarded. There's some cool perks on there.
Yeah. If you want to see more ridiculous Wallace and Gromit references, that's the best way to make that happen, I guess. We do have an incoming transmission. I can see the green light is blinking. So from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders, it's time to get commanded.
Gathering data allows one to draw more authoritative conclusions about the format, like the duration, quality, and conclusion of the average game. Walt, please present your findings from your most recent experiment on 50 games.
Oh, okay. You're doing another side mission for the Space Commanders again. So
another long-term one.
Yeah, how long ago did you get this? 50 games?
50 games. It took me 20 weeks to record the data from 50 Commander games. So I've actually mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast, maybe very briefly. And those of you who play with me are very aware of it because I pull it out and
pretty much every time you finish a game, you're like, oh, I'm filling out a game log.
Yes. So I've been keeping a game log. I won't spoil the different aspects of the game that I've been logging because we're going to go into all of that when we look at the actual stats themselves. But yeah.
Interested.
50 Commander games. It took 20 weeks for me to reach 50 games. This averaged out to me playing 2.5, roughly, average games per week. Which
that seems a little low to me.
That's interesting because to me, this was higher than I expected. I was kind of thinking like, oh, you know, I play at the LGS, like that seems like the main place. On Tuesday nights. And mostly I tend to play 1 to 2 games. Very occasionally do I fit 3 in. So I was like, how on earth am I getting 2.5 average games per week? But what I didn't account for is that between those, and even though they were rare, there were times where I was playing a lot of games in a row. So kitchen table.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. Like, we did a lot of kitchen table stuff where we'd play like 4 games in a night.
Well, or even, and we'll go into a sec where all the games were played, but I played 5 games at that Command Fest. We only went for one of the days of Command Fest, but we were there the whole day and we played 5 games. So, like, that is going to bump up my average quite substantially to play 5 games in one day.
That's fair. I would have thought, I reckon there's also other contributing factors here. Like, just recently you've done a show and you've had like a whole season for that. And you've taken a lot of time out to work on the show.
Haven't played much kitchen table in that time. It's
exactly.
True, yeah.
So I think that I genuinely reckon your average would probably be higher in the average 20 weeks across, the whole year. I reckon you'd probably get 3 to 4 games a week if we
Interesting. I should have done, the thing I should have done is pull a line graph or something with date on the bottom and then number of games, and you could see helping up. Maybe I'll pull that at some other point. That might be interesting.
Share it on the Patreon or something.
Yeah. I do want to specifically mention here, because I sort of already mentioned it, where the games were played. I think this might be interesting for those of you just conceptualizing the data and what it'll be alluding to. So over those 50 games, 31 were played at an LGS, and actually, funnily enough, all of them were played at our local game store, Good Games Greensboro.
There you go. Statistically most likely to play with Walt if you go to Good Games
Greensboro. Most of my games are played there. There were 13 kitchen table games. That was the next most popular. That kind of checks out, I think.
Yep.
There's 5 of those at Command Fest, and only 1 played over Spell Table.
Yeah, you've not been as present on Spell Table in the last couple of months.
No, it's interesting. I think if the game log extended back even a couple of months, I reckon I would have captured a lot more Spell Table games.
For sure.
There was a period of time where both of us were playing a lot over Spell Table. It's kind of ebbed a bit now. We'll probably go back up when we start streaming.
To be honest,
very soon.
I still play quite a bit because of CDH.
Yes, that makes sense. But yeah, clearly the Tuesday Commander nights are still my main way of playing Commander, which is what I expected.
Yeah.
Right? For those of you who are curious as well, in terms of the breakdown of the games, and especially those of you, we've talked a lot about how James plays a lot more CDH than me. Of the games that I played, there are actually 4 categories here. There were 46 casual Commander games. There was 1 game of CDH. One in 20 weeks. So that really conceptualizes how little I'm drawn towards playing CDH.
Oh my lord.
There were 2 PDH games, so I know that's technically not Commander EDH, but it's close enough that I was willing to count it.
Yeah, 100% is. It's still like a lot of the things that happen in PDH are the same as in EDH.
Yeah.
There are lots of, interaction between multiple players. There's politics. Yeah. It's a multiplayer format.
There's Commander damage. Yeah. There's like 4 players. Like, I think there's enough in common that I'm willing to call it Commander.
Yep.
And there was one, we've talked about this before, machine learning decks game.
Yes.
This was our lovely patron Fletcher when he he's got like a line of code. I don't understand how it works. It's a machine learning kind of thing, like a bot that builds decks. And we played a game where all of the decks were built by this bot, basically.
It was really impressive. And Fletcher, please share the details of how this AI thing works in the Get Commander Discord, because it was interesting.
It
was
super interesting.
It did like a pretty decent job. I had an Agar deck, like the giant that says whenever you're dealing excess damage to a creature, draw a card.
The blue-red one, yeah.
I've always wanted to build that deck. I think it's really cool. And
I think so.
It functioned really, really well. But then there were some like random artifacts that you're like, this doesn't do anything for my deck.
I think he was saying like that there was like an algorithm that he'd made that kind of would look at the top cards in EDH Rec. I think it used Scryfall, but Scryfall has an EDH Rec filter. So you can filter something by how commonly it appears in decks on EDH Rec.
Yeah.
It was using that, but he had like a sort of wild card feature.
I think he had like 5 to 10 slots of like wild card appearances.
It would just kind of like grab one from anywhere in the list and go, let's just try that. And so, I was playing this card in one of my decks that was like a 3-mana 1/1 that said in the beginning of your upkeep, put a spore counter on it, and then
this thing.
you can remove like 3 spore counters from it to make 1 saproling.
Wasn't that in your opening hand and
Yeah.
you kept it just
I
so
was
you
like,
could see it work?
This is hilarious. It also had a green burn spell in it. Had a 3 mana instant that said it deals 4 damage to target creature, and it was from like 4th edition or something. And I was
Wow.
like, this is bizarre.
Well, there you go. AI, that was part of your 50 games.
So, in terms of like, we've both done a little bit of science in uni and high school and that kind of thing. If you're drawing conclusions about the quality of the game, this one would be what we call an outlier. So it's not necessarily going to reflect the data at large, but it's in there. So
It's in there, yeah. And it does reflect there will be an outlier of like random games. Like, something that didn't appear here was Precon decks. You didn't have a Precon game, but like
I don't play Precon games, at all in this case. Yeah.
just recently, like I played a full 4-pod of the Doctor Who decks. So like that for me would be considered an outlier game because it's not something that I've created. It's more of a board game style effect. We played Plane Chase and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's interesting that out of the 50 games that you've got, they're actually mostly what you would expect to see, like pretty much predominantly casual decks that you've built.
Yeah.
With CEDH appearing because you've got one.
Yeah.
And then, a couple of other formats.
And some other stuff. Yeah. I think this illustrates the divide between how much CDH each of us play, though, pretty heavily. I thought that there would be at least, maybe 2 to 3, maybe even 4 CDH games in that period of time. So when I saw one, I was like, wow, no wonder it feels like you are like our CDH authority at Get Commanded here.
Yeah, I do play a lot of it now. I would also say that I probably now, just looking at the stats, I'm probably going to try and now, when I get back from the UK, I'm going to try and record 50 games myself.
Okay.
Might not do a full episode on it because I'm looking at the data that you've collated here and there's a lot.
It's extensive.
But I'm guessing that I might play more Commander than you.
On average, I think so.
I would reckon. And also like more Commander games because CEDH games tend to be a lot quicker. And I occasionally will drop down to the game store on like a Wednesday night and play with CEDH people. And we'll play like 5-6 games of CEDH in a night. Whereas you're playing a casual game that's, I'm assuming we're going to talk about the duration of the games.
That's a big one. Well, that was one that Space Commanders called out, so I'll have to.
Because, I reckon, my duration of games would probably be a lot shorter if I'm playing more CDH.
Because of CDH, yeah.
And even then, I tend to play, more higher-powered casual than you.
You do, definitely.
So I feel like those games end a little bit quicker as well.
For sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel like I should... For data, do my own 50 games so I can see the comparison.
That would be super interesting. If nothing else, if we just did a comparison episode where we compared the stats with each other, I think that could be really interesting.
All right. When I get back, we'll do it.
Based on the fact that you're playing CDH, it will not take you 20 weeks.
I reckon. Well, if I play one CDH tournament in that time, that's like that's like
6 games,
7 games.
Yeah, for sure.
Like a fifth of the way there.
I thought we should jump right into some of the juicy stuff. I know you're all thinking it. What was Walt's win rate? What percentage of games did I win? It was 34%.
Wow. So you are above because we've said before, 25% should be your win rate because
in a perfect world
where you're playing perfectly balanced games of Commander all the time, anyone should have the opportunity to win. So you've got a quarter of a chance. To win. 25%, but you're above average. You're 10% above average, basically. 9% above average.
Look, I think, yes, I totally agree. In a perfect world, it should be about 25%. I'm not that dissatisfied with a 1 in 3 chance of winning. I mean,
that's pretty amazing, man.
Selfishly, I'm like, this is great. And I win this often. And I'm also kind of like, look, I think you've got to acknowledge, we've updated our Rule 0 template to acknowledge the amount of experience people have playing Commander.
That's our 4th question now. Yeah.
I've played and watched a lot of Commander. I don't think it's unreasonable that when I play, to be honest, a lot with new players at our local game store or less experienced players at our local game store, I probably am just more likely to win. If we were to look at some of the other players at our store who tend to win a lot based on our, subjective
they've
experience.
been playing longer than us, more consistently than us.
Yeah, and I would suspect that, someone like Daniel or Ben or some of these people might have a win rate even higher than mine. I think I lose to them so often.
Yeah. We used to have, with one of my play groups, we used to have a couple of people do this, kind of scale thing where they would start at 0, right? And this is how they'd keep track of their win rate.
Yeah.
They would start at 0 and then they'd play a game. And once they play that game, if they win, they get plus 3 points because they beat 3 opponents.
I heard of this.
Where if they lose, they take away a point because they got beaten by 3 opponents and it's just a loss, right? So if you add and subtract, so if you add 3 when you win and take away 1 when you lose, you can see if you're in a positive win rate, which is higher than 25%.
So higher than 0 in this case, because you have more points. You'd be gaining more points than you're losing.
Correct. And then if you would see if you were in a lower bracket, because if you're below 0, that means you're losing more often. And this actually came about because one of my good friends, Brad, felt like he was losing more games of Commander than he was winning, which, to be fair, you probably are.
Yeah.
Because, even you're losing more games than you're winning, 34%.
I'm
If you were
losing 66% of the time, that's 2/3 of the time, I'm still losing.
Exactly. And this was a way for Brad to to get in his head to be like, no, actually, I'm actually pretty good because I'm above 25%. So if I get 3 points, I'm going above. And like he was sitting on for a really long time. He was sitting on about like 6 or 7 points, like there or thereabouts. And I'm like, dude, that's actually considerably higher than losing more often. Like, considerably.
I think I think this is just more likely to happen, right? I just think when you're very experienced, and especially when you're playing a lot with people who might be less experienced than you, it's just going to happen. And I think you should aim to keep it as close to 25% as you possibly can. But I think it's okay that it's a little higher. I think if my win rate was sitting more like 40%, I might be like, okay, I'm probably misrepresenting my decks a bit here, or I'm making some missteps in power level discussions and that kind of thing. But I think 34%, I'm sort of like, I'm a little higher than average, but not a lot higher.
I think the important thing to take away from this is you should expect to lose. And I think with Brad's number scale, he was like, if he had a couple of weeks where he'd be running away and he'd be on 10, 15 points and he gets a loss and he has to take away a point and he's like, I deserve that. It's about time that I have a loss, you know?
It was very interesting watching across the data as I was looking down the log that there were kind of periods of time where I reckon my win rate was a bit higher and then periods of time where it was a lot lower, where I lost 6 or 7 games in a row.
To see it on that plot graph, for example, if you were playing more often, your win rate would be higher because you'd be more in the zone if you...
I reckon. I think it also has a lot to do with the commander I was playing. But we'll go into that a bit later.
Sure.
I don't know that I tracked the win rate of each commander because I think I found most of them were pretty reasonable. But there were some commanders that I just lost with a lot. And speaking of... Which commander decks did Walt play the most often?
This was one of the ones that I guessed when we were having a chat, and I nailed it.
I let James have a couple of guesses, and I wanted to leave the rest up to him to hear live now.
I have been looking away from the notes and the data that Walt has on screen, so I can try and guess some of this later on.
So the decks I played the most frequently, the most common deck that was played is the one that James guessed, which is my Catilda and Lear humans deck.
This has become like the season 2 version of your Kaza Royal Chaser deck of the Get Commander podcast. Like when we first started, you just built this Kaza Wizards deck. Yeah. And it was all you talked about. Then it kind of became Mowu. Now it's definitely Catilda and Lear.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's interesting which decks I played most often and how recently those decks were built. So,
interesting.
Because the most played deck was Catilda and Lear, which I built probably about 4 or 5 months ago now, if I had to guess. I played that deck 7 times over the 50 games, which is pretty significant.
It's nearly, it's like just under a fifth of all games.
Yeah, pretty frequently that's making an appearance. My next most common was Thursday Incarnate. This is the Thrifty Thursdays commander. For those of you who may not have seen the episode, Deck Archetypes Thrifty 100, I think it was called.
It's episode 52, I think.
That sounds right, actually. Yeah, because it was a funny thing if it worked out.
52
the number of
weeks a
year.
year.
Yeah. So Thursday Incarnate I played 6 times. I wanted to test the deck, wanted to make sure it was working. I also wanted to play it because it was a goofy thing that I'd done.
Yep.
The custom commander there. And then the next ones were all tied. There were 4 decks. Yeah, 4 decks tied at 4 games apiece, so a little bit of a jump down. But it was Estrad, Baba Lysaga, Azor the Lawbringer, and Mowu Loyal Companion.
Really happy to see that Azor's on the top 3 list here because, That's a deck that I even said a couple of episodes ago that I wouldn't be shocked if you disassembled because I don't feel like it gets enough love.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's appeared is good, and I actually really want you to be playing this deck more often.
I think
it's a great deck.
I've been more wanting to have a deck for high-powered games if they happen, and so I've been bringing it to the LGS. I brought it to Command Fest and brought it out a couple of times, I think, at Command Fest.
Yeah,
because just match power with some of the decks that were there.
Because I feel like you're a bit of an outlier of most Commander players. A lot of people are probably, on average, I would have a guess, building a lot higher than you in terms of power.
I'd say so.
And I think Azor is your answer to these games where you're faced with it, because you're running you're running Heuristic Study, you're running Solitude, you're running. I think you got an Urza Saga in there now. Have you?
No, I don't have an Urza Saga. No, but
you got a Shockland in there though.
There's a Shockland in there. There's a Path to Exile. There's a Swords to Plowshares. Like, it's just a lot of the best cards.
Yeah.
I would say the synergy pieces in the deck are still pretty goofy and weird, like most of my decks. But the interaction is better than any other deck I have. Like, it's got the great counter spells, really good mana base. Like, just the consistency goes up as a result.
You have got an infinite in there as well. It kills you when it happens. You draw your deck out and no way of stopping it.
But yes, technically, it is an infinite combo. Or, infinite until I run out of cards in my deck and die. I
don't know. Maybe like if you've to gain control of a Platinum Angel, you're okay.
Would that not be a draw? Because I can't stop the loop.
Oh yeah, you would make a loop that doesn't actually.
Oh no, because I can't draw cards anymore. I would run out of cards, so I can't draw cards, so I can't gain life to make me draw cards. So it would stop. It would actually stop the loop, at zero cards.
You would end up with 0 cards in library.
Yeah, and then Persona Removes the Platinum Angel, I've lost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to go back to the stats here, I do love Azor the Lordbringer though. It's interesting that... the other one I wanted to note here. I played all of my decks at least once.
So there wasn't a single deck in your collection, which granted is huge, that you didn't play?
At least once.
That's awesome. That's
there were
really
a lot
good.
of decks I only played once, though, which is interesting, I think, compared to 7 and 6 and 4 for some of these ones.
Sure.
So I think the most interesting thing to note here is there's a very clear tendency towards decks I've built recently. Azor is the only deck in that top 6 that I've just described that wasn't built in the last 12 months. Azor is my first Commander deck, so admittedly is very old in that way.
Yeah, it was made out of cards with elastic band around them in an iPad box.
A long time ago. But yeah, the other 5 decks that are in that top 6 are all very recent. Barbala Saga I just built. Estrad and Catilda and Lear were just before that. Thursday Incarnate was around that time, and Mobu was the deck I built before that.
It's pretty much all within the last year and a half.
Yeah. And most of them even within the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess this does say a little bit about like the fact that a lot of people have decks just that are sitting around.
Yeah.
They could disassemble them and probably not even miss the fact that they're gone.
Yeah. I this is really like I've been an advocate on this podcast before for disassembling decks that you're not enjoying, but I think I maybe need to do it more because there's decks that I love and that I enjoy playing, but I'm not reaching for them.
Well, I just recently did a huge cull of my decks, and it is in preparation for a command that will be coming soon because I read it. All of James's deck ranked because Walt did his. Mine's coming, I promise.
To do yours, yeah.
But I culled a lot in preparation for that because I had just decks sitting on a shelf. Like I have an Atraxa Infect deck.
You never pulled that out.
I never play that deck.
No.
So yeah, I think this is a good message. Like if you can see just by like the fact that Walt played 50 games and one deck came up once because he built it years ago and it was just because he tried to match a power level or he wanted something different. That deck could be put to better use by using the cards for a new deck. You're not going to miss it.
No.
50 games came up once.
Yeah. It's probably not being played as much as it should. Yeah, I totally agree. I just wanted to have one little last note on this bit, which is that I tracked the performance of each of my decks in each game. I just had a separate section of my game log that just was like freeform notes of just like how the deck performed. And I especially was highlighting cards that weren't working. This was a really good way for me to slow down my tinkering because I had to kind of see a card not work, and often a couple of times before I was like, this has got to come out. Like the most recent one was in my my I'm blanking Barbara Saga deck.
Yeah.
I was playing Guildless Commons, the colorless bounce land.
Yeah.
And I realized that because I'm sacrificing lands in that
you
deck,
don't want to sacrifice a bounce land.
and also it's like cutting me down on lands, and it's a colorless land, and a lot of the things in the deck were like low mana curve, high color pip intensity cards. Anyway, and it took seeing it a couple of times in a game before going, I think this is actually not doing what it needs to do in the deck.
Interesting.
And I cut it.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for like slowing down, because I have seen you like literally have been like walking in for a recording session. You're tinkering with a deck and you're like, I'm cutting this card. I'm like, I haven't even seen that card come out in your deck yet.
I really want to avoid doing that,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that this helped me to do it.
Especially when you're buying singles and like you've bought this card from a website. It's come to you. You've put it in the sleeve. You've shuffled it up. You've just not seen it in your hand.
I know.
And then a month later, you're like, well, to the bin you go.
Yeah. Yep, it's true. I'd like to dive into specifically what the Space Commanders asked for, because it's been a while already, and we've just given the rundown of the data. But one of the things that I was tracking and that the Space Commanders wanted to hear about was duration. The duration of the games that I tracked.
Interesting.
I didn't track this across every game. I think the first 4 I didn't do it for, and then was like, oh, this might be interesting to track. And then I tracked it for like 46 games or something.
Especially considering we have an episode called Our Games Are Too Long.
Yeah. I really was interested in that. And I also wanted to track the performance of the Commander clock, because I used that for a few games and I wanted to see what they did to the length of the game.
Interesting. All right.
So
show your findings.
I will. Across all of the games that I played, including ones with the clock, the average game length was 100 minutes. So an hour and 40 minutes.
Hour and 40.
Yeah.
That's a bit longer than I would have thought.
I actually thought it might be a little longer than that, to be honest.
Interesting.
I think it's not too bad. It's a bit longer. In Our Games Are Too Long, that episode, we mentioned that we'd love games that go for 90 minutes, even 80 minutes is good. So an hour and 40 is a bit longer than that. There were some outliers here, by the way, of games that went for 2 hours or 3 hours in some cases.
It's not shocking. I think I was a part of a few of those.
I recall you were, yeah. So this is a bit longer than you expected, probably a bit shorter than I expected, but it's
not
reasonable.
Fun. And to be honest, in our episode, when we talked about game length, we pretty much hit the nail on the head. We said that it would be between the 80 and 2 hour mark, like 80 minutes, 2 hours. Like, and 100 sits kind of right in the middle there. I would probably say that 100 minutes is, I think I said that my precise want of a game is 90 minutes.
Yeah.
100 minutes is just at that cusp where I'm like, I'm okay with this as long as I can see if I get to 90 minutes in a game and I can see the end of the game coming, then I feel okay to play for an extra 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But if I'm at 90-minute mark and I'm like,
a board wipe's just resolved.
oh my God, I'm just like, well, Jesus. All right, let me go get dinner. Actually, no, let me put the roast in the oven because it's going to take that long.
The beauty of kitchen table. Let me just cook something real quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of here. Yes. So that was across all of the games, though. So then that includes the games where we use the Commander clock. So this, for those who don't know, this was the sort of chess clock style thing that Command Zone have been a big advocate for recently.
They've used it for Game Nights Live, which has been really the Grand Championship just happened for Game Nights Live.
I haven't watched it yet, but I'm really keen to.
I won't tell you any spoilers. I've watched it. It was so good.
I've heard it was really good. I actually don't. Do you know who won? Because I saw it on socials, but
I do know who won. All right, we won't give any spoilers.
No, we won't give any spoilers
for the listeners, but go check it out. It was an amazing game and just like great personalities at that table.
Yeah, it looked like a really good pod.
Yeah.
So they've been a big advocate for this Commander clock. So basically, you set an amount of time at the beginning of the game. The clock counts down when it's your turn or when you have priority. When it reaches 0, you either lose, or in the case of how we've been playing it, you have till the end of that turn to attempt to win the game. So the clock was used. We ended up opting for between 15 and 20 minutes most of the time.
Which is something we've said is kind of perfect.
Yeah. And so I used it for 14 games. So I didn't use it most of the time. I was not using the clock, but especially when I was playing at the store and there was like 80 minutes or an hour left until it's closed, I was very often like, hey, folks, I know we want to get another game in. I think the most likely chance we have of it ending before the store closes is if we use this clock.
For sure.
Do you mind giving it a go? And people were very accommodating of doing that. So for the games where we didn't use the clock, so this was not the 14, the other 30 odd games, The average game length was 109 minutes. So about an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah, so longer than the average game length.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that when you use the clock, it was below average?
It was comfortably below average. The average length of a game with the clock was 74 minutes.
Whoa, that is significant difference.
Yeah, so
That's
an hour and
just
50 versus
over
an hour and 15. So like 35 minutes of difference there.
Oh my lord, that's huge.
Yeah.
So like, okay, so if you do 15 minutes on each person's clock, that's an hour. So
Theoretically,
it should be an hour if everyone runs down to 0. But you get to the end of the game and you're like, no, everyone can take a little bit of extra time.
Yeah.
And
I found in practice that if you set a 20-minute clock,
Yeah.
the game very frequently finishes in an hour, which is interesting because you actually have an hour and 20 minutes there. But because of the amount of time that doesn't get used by players who don't make as many actions, usually about an hour, and you can finish a game in about 45 or 50 minutes if you set a 15-minute clock.
Interesting. I was playing in a couple of those clock games, and the thing that I respect a lot about the clock is that it just encourages game action. It encourages players to like make a decision and not faff about and go into the tank.
Yeah.
Like going into the tank is fine, and I go into the tank when there's a clock on because you need to think.
Yeah.
But the fact that it like gets you to go, right, just make a decision now.
Yeah,
Like you've thought about it, make the decision.
Yeah.
Because like there's, you can sit in front of a decision going, right, A or B. You can look at all the pros and cons for A, all the pros and cons for B. Once you've thought of those lists, if it's pretty even and it's a 50-50 split, there's not much point sitting around trying to find an extra reason because you've already thought about it. Just hit a button, go for A, swing out at Walt. That's the decision.
There's so much hidden information when you're making these decisions that at some point you just have to pick one, right?
Yeah.
Like you can and ah about it, as you say, forever, basically. You can sit there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes and go, oh, I'm not sure. But yeah, the clock, basically, it's winding down. You have your 5 minutes in the tank, 4 minutes, 3 minutes in the tank. You're considering everything. And then it goes, oh, crap, I better make a decision. And you just pick something.
Yeah.
And it keeps the game moving forward. And yeah, it means you just try stuff. You're more likely to be like, well, I'll just see what happens if I try this.
I like clock games.
Me
personally.
too.
I think, and the other thing that I really like is, like you said, when you're in the store, there's an hour left to go, and there are people that are keen. And I would say that the clock is something that I would not bring to new players. I think it's pretty brutal on new players.
It is.
But experienced players, like even just like a year or two experience in Commander, that's where the clock shines because this is where people like understand what cards do. You don't have to explain the card. Like the other thing we'll do if someone's explaining something, we'll pause the clock because that's something for the whole table.
Yeah.
Whereas
and rules questions are the same, right? Like if you're checking a ruling, absolutely no one's time should be going down.
Correct. And I think that for those scenarios, you should not include a new player because the amount of times you're going to need to pause a clock to explain a new card for a new player or something like that is going to be way more, just naturally. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the new players need more time to have things explained.
And I think the time pressure feels more intense for new players because they're already under a certain amount of pressure of just like trying to keep the game moving forward and understand what they're doing and make right decisions. And then, when you add a timer to this, it's just like a bit too much. And I, by the way, polled people at the end of most games on how people felt about the clock. So there was 14 of those games. I think there were only about 2 times where I got people being like, I didn't love it. And, I maybe would have preferred a game without it, or this is why I sort of didn't love it. Yeah. And to be honest, most of the time that was when we used the shorter clock, like a 15-minute clock or something.
15 minutes is very quick.
You really don't get much time. It's you're playing a game as fast as you possibly can, basically. But the 20-minute clock, vast majority of people were like, I actually like that for keeping the game moving forward. But most people were also like, if I wanted to really socialize with the pod, I would opt out of having the clock. And it's like, totally fair enough.
Sure.
The next question that the Space Commanders, or the next word they used was quality. So they want to know the duration, the quality of the average game. This is a little harder to quantify, but I thought I would have a look at, because I've noted the commanders I played against for every game.
Yep.
Which told me quite a lot about just the format at large and also the people I was playing against. Hint, hint, hint.
You kind of gave me a side eye there. I'm assuming.
You'll see. So the commanders I played against, I've managed to wrangle Excel into putting it in a graph, in a sequence of how often commanders appeared in the list. So how often I played against particular commanders.
Did you use a pivot table? Pivot tables are like my favorite things on the planet.
I think I did.
I love
think
pivot
I did end up
tables.
using a pivot table. It was very cool. Excel is amazing.
It's
man.
such a good
You
program.
can do anything. So the really interesting thing here, so there were 100 and, sorry, I'm trying to do some quick maths here, 147 commanders that I played against for the entire time.
Wow.
And really importantly, only 80 of those were repeats. In other words, commanders I saw more than one time across 50
Interesting.
games. And keep in mind, I'm playing against 3 commanders every
So
single
it's just
time.
over half.
More than half the time, a commander I was playing against in those 50 games was one I had never played against in the other games in the series.
That's awesome.
I think that's great for the diversity of the format,
That's
right?
actually, that makes me so happy because I've been really worried recently that the amount of product that Wizards put out makes people mass build the latest, strongest commander. Like when Talion came out, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, we're just going to see Talion everywhere because it's the best blue-black value commander.
100%.
I'm actually pretty proud to say I've not seen it outside of CDH.
Yeah.
I've also, like, for example, when like the Brothers War came out, I was like, oh my God, everyone's going to be building Mishra. Everyone's going to be building Urza. Everyone's going to be doing this and that. I'm going to see it all the time. I know one person with a Mishra deck that they actually play it pretty consistently.
Yeah.
That's it. But like, I feel like I'm really happy to know that my worries and concerns here were unwarranted because, well over half was 80 versus 67.
Yeah.
That's, Oh,
Great.
Go Commander players.
Yeah.
I'm really interested if this is an isolated thing just within our local game store and our meta. This is something I'm curious about. Do you see the same Commander where you're playing?
I think this would be really different if you just played in a play group. You know what I mean? Like, I think the fact that
for
so
sure. Like
many
if you're
of the
playing with the
games-
same 6 people.
you would see the same decks a lot more often. Whereas, because we play so much in LGS, I think we just like see more different players is the main thing. And so different players play different commanders. But I was also just so relieved that the format is so diverse. And I'm sort of starting to see a lot more where the rules committee are coming from when they say, hey guys, we know you're worried about this latest commander and the fact that it's going to be busted.
But it's not coming up.
Well,
we just don't see it.
And also, it might come up for that little period of time, and then most people disassemble that deck, and you never see it again.
How many people do you see playing Corvold now?
Yeah, so
Like,
few.
yeah.
It's so rare.
Oh, also, actually, on that, shout out Nick. Just recently, I want to actually say this on the pod. In a couple of episodes, maybe a few episodes now, we said building your commander wrong, or like basically choose the wrong commander for the strategy, or choose the wrong strategy for the commander. It's a great episode. Go check it out. But we challenged our listeners to build Corvold, Fakehurst King, the original Jund broken Corvold, as no treasures, just food.
Yep.
And Nick did it. The link is in our Discord. Huge shout out, man. You actually did it. It was really impressive.
He did the challenge accepted thing and went at it, and the deck looks sweet.
It actually looked really fun and really playable, and not something that like there was none of that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, that card alone with Corvold on field is going to make you draw 50 cards and make you think for half an hour. I feel like it's just like a pretty decent card draw engine.
It's just like a value engine. Yeah.
Anyway, just a side tangent.
No, shout out.
Go
100%.
check it out.
Yeah, definitely. So then I was interested then. So I found out, 80 of those commanders that I played against were repeats. 67 were played against only once the entire time. Mm-hmm. So then I was interested in which commanders I was playing against the most frequently because I had this table and it was in order. So the most played against commanders for me, they were all tied on 6 games that I played against them for, were Ur-Dragon, Tornos Urza's Apprentice.
That makes sense.
And Phylath World Sculptor.
That's another one of mine.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 2 of those commanders, I know one person who plays each of those, and that one person is James.
Yeah. I mean, it lines up. I built Tornos and like kind of in the time frame that you were doing this, and then like really tinkered with the deck and really made it functional.
Yeah.
And Phylath recently had just gotten an upgrade because it'd been on the shelf for ages. I wasn't playing it and I neglected it and I forgot how much fun it was. So I rebuilt it.
Yep.
and it is now really, really fun. So yeah,
It makes sense. These are in the same way that I prioritize the decks.
Tilda and Lear and stuff like that.
James
Yeah.
is prioritizing decks he either made over or built
Sweet,
recently.
we've already got some data for James's games. That's great.
Dragon, I think, makes sense. It's a popular commander. And this was interesting in that I know one particular player at our store, Jordan, who has an Dragon deck, and most of the games were against him, but I actually played 2 games against a different Dragon deck as well.
Sweet.
I think that one was a Changelings deck, which was pretty funny, actually. But yeah,
That
6
is actually
times
pretty cool.
altogether, which is not all that bad.
Sure.
But yeah, you'll note that James owns 2 of those decks, which brings us to James.
Oh.
I decided to do a big rundown on specifically how often I played against James, how often James beat me, how often I beat James.
Oh, is this going to ruin our friendship?
It's not going to ruin our friendship, but I thought it'd be interesting to look at.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
you were present in. So keep in mind there are 50 games here.
Sure.
You were present.
Wait, can I guess?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to guess. I'm going to say 25% of games I was in. So what would that be?
quarter.
That'd be yeah, what's a quarter of a 50?
Maths. 18 or something like that.
Yeah, 16, 17.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So wrong. You were present in 33 games.
Wow.
Which is 66% of my Commander games.
Holy hell.
i.e. 2/3 of the time that I was playing Commander in the last 20 weeks, you were in the pod.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Doesn't that put it in perspective?
We do play a lot of Commander together.
Right? It's interesting. I think your number would be lower because you play more Commander.
I play-
and you play more Commander with other people like CDH and stuff like that.
Yes, and I have, my data would probably be skewed because like a typical CDH run, I'd play like 5 games. And because as we know, you don't play a lot
I'm
of
not
CDH.
in any of those games.
You're not in any of those games. So I reckon you'd probably appear in maybe 25% of my games.
I reckon it might be a little high, maybe like 30
Maybe
or 35.
Yeah, actually 25 is way low.
It would not be 66%.
Jesus. Okay. 2/3.
2/3 of the time that I
Wow.
play Commander, you're in the pod, which is pretty funny.
Okay, well now at least we've got some credibility to say that we do know what it's like to play against each other
yeah.
on this podcast.
And you wonder we're always talking about the tricks of like how to beat James, how to beat Walt. Like we've done it many times.
Sure.
Speaking of beating each other,
This is the bit that I'm so nervous for.
so there were 18 times in those 33 games that
Yep.
one of us won. So about half the time, which is good actually.
That's
right.
Yeah,
We're winning collectively between the 2 of us. If you divide it in 2, we're winning 25% of the time.
it shows that we're not pub stomping
No,
other
collectively,
people. Yeah.
in the games we're playing in, there are other people winning those games half the time. That's
Yeah.
great,
And
right?
that is great. Like we played a spell table game just recently. I don't know if that was a part of your game log, but we played with a listener from the UK.
That was
That was just after the
that
game
was
log.
game 51.
Oh,
So that one
wow,
is not in the
okay.
log. Yeah.
So that one wasn't in the log, but we did play with a listener from the UK.
Benjamin.
Benjamin, hopefully going to come to your LGS while I'm over there.
Yeah.
Trying to line it up. But yeah, we played with Benjamin, and I played a deck that I like talked up a bit, and I said, oh, it's really good. I played it against Walt the other day, and it like annihilated everyone on turn 6
Yeah.
and had 1 million prowess tokens, and it did
No.
nothing.
I was so sorry for you to be in that game because it was just like
I was
just
feeling
agony.
I was filling the 4th as well. Like I jumped on being like, because I was just like at home.
Yeah, someone else logged off and we were like, oh, we need one more. And James was like, oh, I'll hop on.
Yeah.
Poor thing. It's
all
the
right.
only game he
Did
played that
fine.
night.
It did nothing.
Yikes. Anyway, so
Sure.
18 of those 33 games, one of us won. Do you want to have a guess at the breakdown of how many of those games were won by me and how many were won by you? Of 18.
So
So
18.
if we won
So
9 each, that would be 50-50.
50-50. I reckon I beat you more often than you beat me.
So how many times do you reckon you won across those 18 games?
I reckon I won, but not by a lot. Not by a lot. I reckon it's probably like I won 10 or 11 games.
You are right on the money.
Am I? Damn.
You won 10 times and I won
Wait.
8 times.
That's okay. At least it wasn't like me winning 15
No.
of those times. I'm okay. Because that was what I was worried about with our friendship. If you'd looked at this data and it was like James has kicked my ass
James is always
18
beating me.
times, like
No, thankfully not the
thank
case.
heck.
Pretty good, right?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, 50-50 between the 2 of us. So
I
we're
think-
playing in the right pods, evidently.
Yeah, I think this is testament to how good we are at balancing powers of decks.
I think so.
I think we are. The fact that we have so many commander decks is helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that we can always say like, "Oh, I don't think this is a Merrin game. I don't think you should
Yeah.
bring that out." Like, this is an experimental deck. Merrin is very tuned and
Yeah,
synergized.
yeah.
I have no idea what this deck can do. Do you mind bringing something that's a little bit less predictable?
I think we're really good at this because we know our own decks, but also we know each other's decks really well. Where sometimes I'll pull out a deck and you'll pull out a deck, and we'll like look at each other and be like, I think, that basically that. I think Marin's not quite right here because you're playing that. I'm playing this, and I can see the other players are playing this. That's not quite right, I don't think.
I actually reckon we did an episode ages ago where at the end of the episode we did like a quiz for each other. Do you remember that?
Which quiz was this? We've done a couple of quizzes now.
But like we did a quiz where it's like, how well do you know my... I think it might have been the Playgroups episode yonks ago where it was like, how well do you know my decks and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like one of the questions was, what's the most expensive card in my Niv Mizzet CDH deck? And all that
that's
kind of
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
I reckon there's a whole episode in that if the Space Commanders want a full quiz. James v. Walt.
We know you're listening, Space Commanders. It might be interesting to see. We'll see if that command pops up.
Interesting. Is there any other interesting data from the games that I was in?
There is, totally. So I was looking at which decks of ours won those games. So for me, I won 8 times. The only deck I won with multiple times against you was Azor the Lawbringer, which won only twice. So
that makes sense. I actually, in my brain, think that deck beats me a lot.
Yeah.
In my head, like when I see it.
I mean, I only played it 4 times across the entire of those times. It might have been that the only times you saw it might have been those 2, which is when I beat you.
They won,
Yeah, it's possible.
I actually remember I played a Yuriko game in that.
One of them was the time I beat you and you were playing Yuriko.
And yeah, my Yuriko deck is good.
Yeah.
Like it's teetering on that CDH, should I just make it CDH level?
It's very high powered for sure. But every other time I beat you, so the other 6 times was a different commander deck.
Sure.
Not the case with you.
I'm assuming it was like Tornos, Fire Left.
So you beat me 10 times.
Yeah.
There were only 3 commanders you beat me with. So you beat me...
I'm going to say...
Okay.
Tornos, Fire Left.
Correct twice.
And one more deck?
Yeah, one more deck.
Maybe... Would it be Savine? My new Savine deck?
No, we haven't played enough games for you to have beat me that many times.
Right, okay. I don't know what the other one would be.
It's Zaxara, your Hydra deck.
Wow, that's the deck I kind of pull out when I'm like...
I think this is why. It's because when the decks you pull out against me, because I'm so often playing my low-powered decks, you pull out the same decks multiple times. We'll talk about this in a sec. But yeah, you beat me. So of the 10 times you beat me, 4 of them were Firelath.
Wow. I have very strong memories of like having a 30-31 plan and just being like, I can fling this at anyone.
Yeah, 100%. You beat me 3 times with Tornos Urza's Apprentice.
Sure.
And twice with Zaxara. I'm just now realizing that's only 9 times. So there must have been a 10th deck there that I've not tracked. I don't know what that was. But there's 4.
Probably Savine, right? I think Savine.
Oh, yeah, it must have been. Yeah, you beat me once with Savine, yeah.
I remember it was the first game I had with you with Savine.
Yes.
Oh, the second game, because we had one at PAX that didn't finish.
Yeah.
And then
first completed game.
I ended up getting Monastery Mentor down on like turn 3 and just...
Which is why you were talking it up so much the other day and why it underperformed so badly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting, I think, that based on this data, you pull out the same commanders a lot more often than me. But I think the caveat that I'll put here is that a lot of your commanders I don't see because I don't play as high-powered usually. So Yuriko I don't see very often, for instance. And Scarab God don't see very often as well.
No, you probably also don't see Liesa that much.
No.
Maybe like a couple of times, but it's interesting. I would even say, like, moving forward after disassembling a bunch of my decks, even my new Scorpion God deck.
The Aristocrats thing,
weird deck. But, like, I would say that you're probably not going to see that a lot because it's definitely in that higher-powered, synergized tier. Actually, after I'm taking Yawgmoth out, you probably will.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though. It's so much of this is give and take because I have a couple of times asked you not to play Scorpion God because I've been playing Catilda and Leah.
Oh, because it just kills everything.
It just kills everything on my board and I don't get to do anything.
Sure.
So it's give and take, I think. And so, yeah, for whatever reason, you pull out the same decks a little more often. Do you think, on average, you play the same decks more often than I do?
Well, I definitely think I do now because I disassembled a lot of my decks just recently. Like, I think I disassembled Siona. I disassembled Atraxa.
Yep.
I also disassembled Gishath. I know. It's very sad. But
wow, really? I didn't know about that one.
It's going to be... after Ixalan, it'll probably be revisited.
All those cards that you can sell, even if you don't build it again, like those cards will be worth so much more.
That was kind of the reason. I was like, look, I'm going to England. It's an expensive trip. Yeah. Gishath's price is about to skyrocket. I disassembled those. I disassembled another deck, which I'm now forgetting. It was another Selesnya thing. Oh, it was a Naya deck. I can't remember. It was Gishath and there was another one.
Oh, another Naya deck?
I think it might have been Oboon. I think I just tore it apart. It was
Precon
that I tinkered with.
Tinkered with a little bit.
Yeah, it was like 5-10 changes or something like that. But I never played them, so I think I have less decks than you now, pretty easily.
I'd probably say so, yeah.
So I probably do play more of the same stuff. But against you, there is like my brain instantly, when I'm sitting down in a pod with you, I go, right, I need to play either Zaxara, Tornos, or...
Yeah, if I'm playing a slightly more powerful deck, maybe Phylath.
Yeah, like that would be like my go-to thing. Like, and especially like, for example, the other night at the game store when I did absolutely whoop your ass with Sabine, the next deck I pulled out was like, right, I'll play Zaxara. Yeah. And I ended up winning that game actually as well.
There you go. That was one of the two.
There you go.
Yeah. I feel pretty good about those stats. Like in terms of we're beating each other about half the time. I'm also really glad we're only winning half the time when we're in a pod.
As a team, yeah.
I'm really glad because I sometimes...
Well, that's the thing. We're not a team.
No.
We're individual players in a pod, and we shouldn't be winning like 80% of the games. Like, I think this is a really great example, like a good ad for our Patreon, right? If you sign up to our Patreon and play games with us, you've got a 50-50 chance of winning.
We're not going to pub stomp you.
We're not going to team up on you.
No, it's not a thing that happens with us.
I'm actually really happy to know that, because I had a feeling that I would beat you more than you beat me.
Yeah, it's just a gut feeling or something, right?
Yeah. And I think it's just more like I tend to have a few more higher powered cards. Yeah, maybe some more synergistic, straightforward decks. Like,
I've said this before, but I also think you have a really, really, in my opinion, better than me understanding of what your win looks like. You've called me out a couple of times for being like, Walt, go to combat, Walt. I don't see the win on board in the same way that you do. I think you see the win often about a turn in advance,
right?
And you sandbag and you politic and you know how to get there. And this is also what makes you so good at CDH, in my opinion.
Thank you.
This skill translates to CDH very, very well. But yeah, I think this is a skill that I'm not quite as good at. I think it just means that I develop really good board states. I think as often, maybe even more often than you do, but I don't win those games as often as you do.
Yes, there's actually a deck that I would like to talk to you about in private to maybe look at your win conditions with. Babala Saga. That deck needs to find a win, man. It's really good at building the engine. Like, the engine on board is incredible. Fuck, it can't win it.
No.
Did Babala Saga get any game wins?
I won one game with it the other day. In fact, the spell table game before we jumped on with you, I played Babala Saga and won that game.
Amazing. All right, glad to know it
can
did win.
Be done. But someone said to me the other day, I was like pulling out the deck and I was like, I think it's so interesting. It was so much fun to build. Like, these are the cool cards you get to include. And Ben was like, oh man, that deck looks so sweet. I'm always looking at it being like, I wonder how that wins. And I was like, yeah, when I work it out, I'll let you know. But it's that kind of a deck.
That's so relatable.
We've been talking for quite a while already, and we've got some beefy stuff to come.
It's going to be a long one.
I think we'd better take a thrifty interlude. So we've got lots of stuff to cover, including some very interesting data about the conclusion. That was the last word that the Space Commanders used. Before that, we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. And as is tradition, I'll be performing a monologue, and this week it's the Cowled Merchant with some new wares. James, would you like to read the card we'll be featuring this week?
I would, and finally, in the thrifty interlude, we have an MDFC. Finally.
Hype.
It's a land on the back, but on the front, it's Tangled Florahedron for 1 and a green. It's a creature elemental that's a 1/1, and it taps to add a green mana. And on the back, you get Tangled Veil, which is a land that enters tapped and taps for a green.
Ever wanted to transform some meaningless garbage into life? I'm here to tell you that you can. Well, not you, but someone can. What's that? All you have in your backyard is 4 cracked stone tiles, your father's ashes, 2/3 of a garden hose, and 16 pieces of cat poo? That sounds like the perfect recipe for a tropical rainforest. Oh, you didn't want a tropical rainforest because they are the most species-dense biome on the planet, which frightens your inner prey instinct, and they're a bit too wet. Well, too bad! The cost of your hubris is the detritus of your neighborhood cats. Actually, we'll take the cats as well. Get budgeted!
Oh, God. Man, that guy is odd.
Yeah, I like him.
Well, I mean, now he's flogging, like, biomes now.
Yeah. Ever wanted a biome in your backyard? Yeah. If you enjoyed that, you can see that we release those every Thursday in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. And you can see us bring some of those to life in video form over on TikTok at Get Commanded. We better hop straight back in. We've got a lot.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while already, and I can see that there's more stats to go.
There are indeed.
We need to get to like the conclusion of it all now.
Conclusion. That was the third word that they used. So they wanted to know about the duration, quality, and the conclusion of the average game. So, funnily enough, when I was tracking this, there are only 49 of these. Because I had to go home because I was like exhausted and stuff was going on. I don't know how that game actually ended, which is kind of funny. But
was I in it?
You were in it. I should have asked you. I could have probably worked it out. Oh well, maybe you can find it out later.
I'll have a look at your spreadsheet.
Yeah, chuck it in. I decided, so I just wrote down at the end of each game how the game ended. So I just described, James cast Overwhelming Stampede with a huge Hydra. That would be what I would write at the end of a game.
I would say that's an average end to that Hydra deck.
It makes sense in that deck. And then what I've done since is I was looking at all the data in preparation for this command, and I decided to divide each of the wins into 4 categories based on how I sort of imagined the win was put together. So one of them is pretty obvious, combat damage.
Oh, right. I see the categories. Yeah.
So this is just someone who, in whatever way they did, swung for lethal with combat.
Sure.
There was combo. And this is the way we use combo, which is that it doesn't have to be infinite. Sometimes it was, but any combination of cards that sort of wins the game by combining them. So
whether it's an A plus B or an A plus B plus C, A plus B plus C plus D.
Exactly.
Tornos.
Tornos plus E plus F. Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And then you might win the game.
Yeah. Then you start again. More A, more B. Yeah.
A1, A2.
So like as an example, one of the games I won was a Rami of the Dead Tide, and I encored Dreadhound. So,
that'll do it.
Yeah. So Dreadhound will mill a bunch of cards. The 3 of them enter the battlefield. Each of them that mills a creature card dings my opponents for 3. That wasn't an infinite combo, but the combination of Arami and Dreadhound is what won me that game.
Yeah.
Combo win. I then had a category, and this was pretty much, there was only one kind of win in this category. I had it called incidental. Is
this like a whoops I win kind of thing?
No, more like there were maybe incremental would have been better. It's like small amounts of damage. So like aristocrats was the big one
so
here.
Like just by playing out your game plan of doing the aristocrats thing,
and
got
there
you
were like
to the win.
Several different triggers in a row, but each of them did a little bit, but collectively they won in that single turn over a while.
You had a vindictive vampire and blood artist.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of tokens, you sacrificed them all, there you go.
And this included, like, if someone had any kind of effect that did something like that. So, there's effects that do that when you sacrifice treasures, for instance. That would still count.
Sure.
Anything that's just pinging a little bit of damage, ping, 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 and then I win.
Sure.
Incidental. The 4th category was just other.
Sure.
There were only 4 of these, I believe. Dying to the clock was one here.
Yep.
If there were 2 players left, the clock goes to 0. You can't win the game. You die. Being milled out happened in one of the games. That's what would go into this category.
Wow. You only got milled out once.
Well, no. In all the games that I played, someone got milled out only once. So this is the game of end of every game, including ones where I didn't win. So the stats.
Sure.
30 combat damage wins across 49 games.
Yep.
So the vast majority of the games in Casual Commander, because that's mostly what I was playing, ending with combat damage. Makes sense.
Yeah, and especially the power level that you're playing at, I can see that 100%.
Happens a lot of the time. There were 10 combo wins, and again, this is just like combinations of a couple of cards. That kind of checks out. You see this pretty often, Dreadhound, that kind of thing.
Yep.
There were 5 incidental wins, so, aristocrats, that kind of thing. And then there were 4 other wins. So, yeah, like 2 of them were the clock, 1 was mill, 1 was I sort of called it combat and combo. So you could sort of put that in one of those categories if you wanted, but it was sort of both. I can't remember how that game ended, but it sort of wasn't combat or combo, and it was both. Very strange.
Godo and Helm.
It might have been Helm of the Host.
Might have been a Helm.
It might have been Helm of the Host and Girid, possibly.
Oh, like making populating.
Populating copies of Girid specifically, and then they each populate each other.
Yeah, I can see
it
how
might
that
have been
would
that.
be.
It was something like that, where it was like, it was combat damage, but it was kind of just 2 cards that did
Sure,
it.
sure,
Anyway,
sure.
I can't remember exactly. But yeah, 30 combat damage, 10 combos, 5 incidental wins, and then 4 other.
Yeah, I'll note here that it's interesting considering you played 1 game of CDH. I'm surprised that 10 combo wins came out.
Yeah,
Like, combo...
so one of those was the CDH game, by the way. It was
I'd assume so.
Oracle and
Demonic.
Oracle and Demonic Consultation. Yeah,
typical.
yeah.
It's how 90% of CDH games end.
It's common.
But I would say that in casual, I'm actually happy, personally. I'm happy to see 10 combo wins.
Yeah.
I think combo wins are actually like a really valid way to win. I think the less salt-inducing ones are the non-infinites.
Yes.
But the ones that, like, for example... I reckon I might have, considering Tornos came up a lot, I reckon I would have beaten you maybe twice, potentially with Tornos, with infinite turns. With
there was
maybe one?
There was a win where you with Memnarch where you stole the whole board.
Right.
That I called a combo win.
Because I think I also flipped the Storm the Vault.
That's what let you have the mana to do
so
it.
I had a million mana.
I still called that a combo, right?
Yeah,
that was
2 cards that...
Storm the Vault, Memnarch, and... Oh, you didn't even really need your commander. Yeah, it was two card combo to me. That was how that game was won, right?
100%.
Yeah. But
I'm
I'm
saying that I'm kind of happy to see that combos are more common than I thought they were.
Yeah.
I'm actually really happy about this. I've had a lot of my playgroup say that people shouldn't be scared or as scared of combos as people are. And we've talked about this on the podcast before where like you can have combos in your deck that aren't salt inducing and don't just end the game out of nowhere. The player still has to work towards the win.
Yeah.
The thing that you've said that I really respect, and now that I build my combos around of it, if the combo happening comes out of nowhere, no one can see it, and it makes all previous game actions irrelevant, that's where it's salt inducing.
Yeah.
But for example, if you've got like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like, for example, my Scorpion God old combo with the Yawgmoth and the Nest of Scarabs, that's an A plus B plus C combo.
Yeah.
I need 3 cards to make that win. And it's very unlikely that they're all coming out in a single turn.
And you'd have to have an Aristocrats effect to even win with the infinite damage, right?
Yeah, well, that's the C. That's the C. The
Oh,
A would be
right.
Yawgmoth, the B would be Nest of Scarabs, C would be an Aristocrats.
Yeah. So at that point, like, it's safe to assume that one or more of those cards were on the battlefield before that turn began. So it doesn't feel like it invalidates the game actions that came before it, because it's like, oh no, I could have stopped this.
Yes.
Like maybe Yawgmoth's been sat at the table for 3 turns. It's
And
like,
the second
if I
you
left
see that-
Yawgmoth alone, I probably deserve to lose.
Yes. And to be honest, if it came down, if I'm highlighting, especially in the Rule Zero conversation, if I said, hey, I've got this combo in the deck, if part of the combo comes down, by all means, swing out at that player.
Yeah, alarm
Swing at
bells
me.
should
Yes.
be ringing. And so if we haven't dealt with that problem, maybe we deserve to lose in that way.
And if you don't have permanent removal, player removal is the next best option. Like, actually go for that.
100%. I also was glad to see combo wins, and it actually led me to a bit of data I created here. So this is not something I tracked very closely in the log, but I realized it could be turned into quantifiable data here, so numbers, which was how many cards were needed to close out the game.
Ah, interesting. So, like, for example, Memnarch and Storm the Vault.
That would be 2.
2 of those cards were required to get that ton of mana. But then I guess you'd also argue that you need all the artifacts on board for that to tap for 1 million mana.
It's nebulous, for sure.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. Like, you quantified how many cards were needed to close it out.
Yes, so I was not including, the things, theoretically, every land you played contributed to your win, because you used the mana in it, right?
Realistically, every Commander game requires 100 cards to win.
Yeah.
You need your Commander.
You needed to have your deck, you needed
the
to shuffle it the
99.
particular way that you did. Like, all of those are factors. But yes, I was most interested in, on that final turn, what was the thing that got you over the line?
Yeah.
And how many cards were needed on that turn, or sort of around that turn, for the win to come together in that way.
Sure.
So, like, as an example, if someone untapped and just had lethal flyers in the air and just went to combat and you're at 10 life, I've got 3 4/4 angels, you have no flyers. If I just untap with those angels, go to combat, attack you, that I called 0 cards, because there were no new cards added to the board state.
Right.
for the win.
You're not deploying a win condition. You're just using what you had at the time to close it out. I see what you're saying.
So I'm talking about like in the same way that when we talk about our deck building template, we talk about win con cards. This is like, kind of highlighting that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
So for example, Overwhelming Stampede.
That
if you just
one.
have the board state and you cast Overwhelming Stampede and it resolves and you win, that's one card.
That was what I would call one card.
Sure, got
100%.
I'm
Whereas
interested
then,
here.
like Nest of Scarabs, that kind of thing, that's 3. But yeah, an aristocrat and a sacrifice outlet, and then just enough ping damage. That was what I would call 2.
Yep.
Because you needed theoretically you
Sacrifice
needed all of the
outlet,
fodder,
yeah.
but mostly you needed to win the game, to end the game that turn.
A
You
sack
had to have
outlet
the sack outlet and the aristocrat effect.
Okay, I'm going to guess here, just because I find these fun.
Yep.
I'm going to assume most of the wins were either consisting of 1 or 2 card win conditions.
Those were the most commonly appearing numbers.
Yes. I thought so.
Yes.
I mean, that's like what we say in our deck building template. We say like, we say like 3 to 5
win con
cards.
Yeah.
That to me makes sense. Like, 3 to 5 win con cards. If you get 1 of them or 2 of them, you should be winning.
You should.
With the right board state and with the right setup. So yeah, I would argue that it checks out to me.
Yeah. So I'll run through the stats here. There were 4 games that ended with 0 cards contributed.
So just like incidental board state.
Yeah, or just that there was lethal damage on board, like already. There were 14 1-card ends to the game.
Probably most Overwhelming Stampede.
That kind of thing. But sometimes it was like Resolve Commander. Like if your commander's got a pump effect on it, or like, someone was playing Sidar Kondo, which gives the creatures that are small unblockable. That was like the 1-card combo quote that won the game. There were 16 2-card win cons, which checks out. There were 8 3 cards, and there were 7 with 4 or more cards.
4 or more?
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually quite a lot.
A lot of those were those incidental wins. You needed to have the sack outlet and the aristocrat effect and this thing.
A token generator.
Yeah,
sure, okay.
A few different parts of that end. So the thing that I found that was really interesting here is, as someone who has publicly been quite opposed to combos in general, I think it's very interesting that so much of the time, even because we know that 30 of those games ended with combat damage, so not combos necessarily, that still theoretically there were 1 or 2 cards that were played that resulted in the win. Like, how different is that really from
a combo?
And I've been on the record, as you say, on this of saying I don't like combos that invalidate the game actions that came before it. And so winning with combat damage, you at least had to have players at a certain life total. You had to have a certain board state. Like, that's why I like that more.
But I'm proud of you for like saying that, combos are basically the same as casting an Overwhelming Stampede on the right board.
Theoretically, I think I have to think more about what it is exactly about combos that I'm opposed to, because it's true. There are some times where a combo ends the game and I'm like, yeah, fair enough, that player earned that. And other times where I'm kind of like, oh, that kind of feels a bit leaves a sour taste in my mouth. But yeah, when I look at the stats, it's like, well, most of the time, regardless of the exact way someone is winning, there are mostly 1 or 2 cards that resulted in the win. So how different is that really from a combo? So I might have to soften my anti-combo status a little bit, I think.
Okay, I'm firstly proud of you. I think that's great.
Thank you.
I'm just going to like survey you to get my own little bit of data in my own brain.
Okay.
How do you feel about some of my combos? Like, we've talked about my Tornos deck before and the fact that it can go infinite turns. You said that because it requires so much setup, you're okay with it. But in recent times, I've actually found some shortcuts of getting there and like stuff like that. How do you feel about that compared to, like, for example, in my Savine deck, I'm running Pariah, which is a combo that means I can't take any damage. How do you feel about like these kinds of combos? Because that doesn't win me the game, Pariah plus Savine.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something to do with when it's on board is important to me. So Pariah being on board, stops you from being able to do anything, but you can see how much of a problem it is. Like, I'm fine losing when it's kind of like, sometimes when you win, like a turn earlier, I've told the board, like, guys,
we need to deal with James.
Look at James's board. Look at James's board right now. He will underestimate it. We got to deal with it. And then, we didn't draw the cards. We didn't find the outs. And then you won. It's like, okay, like, we could see that there was a problem that was there. We weren't able to deal with it. James deserves the win here.
Yeah.
When it's like, sometimes with the Tornos deck, sometimes, not always, the combo really is like, okay, I untap. I have these 15 lands and like 3 mana rocks. I play this, I play this, I play this. I think I win.
Right.
Hasn't happened often, but when that happens, it's kind of like, I mean, I was warning people about how many cards you were drawing, so we could kind of see this coming, but it sort of came a little bit out of left field.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of highlight, the fact that sometimes it just deploys on a turn and wins. And like, I guess the threat assessment there is where you're looking at how many cards I've drawn, how much I've been sandbagging, or like what I've been preparing, or maybe like you can see the setup to the win coming, or like something like that. But like, for example, like a classic combo could be a reiterate combo. Like a bunch of instants and sorceries that combo together. So like reiterate, for those that don't know, is a copy spell, but it has buyback for 3. So it copies a target instant or sorcery on the stack, and you buy it back, meaning you return it to hand again and again and again and again and again. So if you can reduce the cost of reiterate, it reduces the buyback cost, and you can basically reiterate something a million times.
Yeah, very, very common win con in Mizzix of the
is Magnus
decks, because you reduce the cost until you're paying red, I think, to copy it, and then you might have 50 red in your pool, and it's like, cool,
well, you just cast
copy
like
this bolt 50 times.
A mana geyser, and then reiterate, you're winning a game. Like that kind of stuff to me is more like, well, all of my board setup meant nothing. You were just playing solitaire, and I do feel like those combos are the ones that induce salt. Is where people are like, oh, I was close. I was setting up my board. I was working hard, and it just felt like you got it out of nowhere. But the thing I want to say is the people that are setting those combos up that come out of nowhere are actually working hard to do it. They're drawing a bunch of cards. They've made the decision not to deploy half a combo.
The sandbagging is huge there.
And this is my thing. I think that I understand where the salt comes from with combos. I get that some people are like, oh, now all my game actions previously are completely irrelevant, but they weren't. They were relevant because the combo player that had it all in hand was like, oh shit, I can't deploy part of my combo yet, and I have to take like a full turn off to make the table think that they're the threat, or like Walt's about to win, so I can untap and win on my turn. I actually think these combos are much more interesting when you look at them from behind the combo player's eyes.
Maybe there's something to be said for me getting a better appreciation for combos by playing more of them.
And I actually reckon there's a couple of decks that I would love to give you of mine and of one of our good friends, Ben. Ben plays a lot of like more higher powered games, and I reckon you would appreciate just how much work is to set up, like, you know, setting up the graveyard, setting up your battlefield, setting up your hands. There's lots of things. And also setting up the players. You have to kind of let the players get the
Target
players
particular things.
And also see your window. Like if you look at a table and you see everyone's got untapped mana, you're like, oh, I can't deploy a combo win right now. It's going to get stopped. So you have to find your opportune moment.
Interesting. Yeah, I think there's more for me to learn about combos. I'll definitely agree with that. And
Bit of a side tangent from the data, but I think it's relevant considering there were, 10 wins with combos?
They were 10. Yeah. Or maybe 11 if you count that combo plus combat 1. So
that's
they're ending games anyway.
A fifth,
you might as well have some sort of relationship with them. I agree.
For sure.
I think the other big takeaway, I just want to say very clearly here, you need to run win cons in your decks. Over 90% of the games that were played, someone needed to deploy a card or 2, or sometimes 3 or 4 to close out the game. Like only 4 of those games were there just lethal damage on board from flyers or tokens or something. Typically at least an overrun effect, or some sort of protection spell or a board wipe. Like something was needed to get you over the line. So you need to run them in your decks. Like seriously.
So what's the win con in Bubble Saga then?
It's incidental. It comes under the incidental category.
Right, okay,
there are aristocrats effects in there.
I see it.
I had one other stat that I thought was interesting from this section, which is how often the commander itself was one of those cards.
Oh, yeah. Okay, because we've talked about the command, like the choice that you make for commander in your deck building can either fill one of a couple of roles. It can either be like the enhancer, the setup.
It can be the engine. Like
it can be the engine,
My Barbara Saga deck, Baba is just the engine.
It's
Baba
the card drawer,
how
it's
I'm
everything.
Sacking things, how I'm draining people's life, how I'm drawing cards,
Yeah, or it could be the win con. Like a commander like Kamal, Heart of Krosa, is a great example because we always use the overrun, overwhelming stampede as an example. That's a commander with it stapled onto it. Like it's a great example. But there are other commanders that other win con as well. Like, for example, like my Liesa deck is the incidental value.
Yeah.
That's my win con is actually, I'd say I still run a few win cons like Debt to the Deathless just to get me over the line.
But Liesa can do it on her own.
Liesa, if you just sit back and protect the hell out of Liesa, she'll win you the game.
Yeah.
Other decks, for example, like Firelaf creates my board, but doesn't win me the game.
No, you need that other effect to get over the line, usually. Yeah, for sure. So the Commander itself was one of those cards in the categories I highlighted before, about 45% of the time.
Nearly half.
Nearly half. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, as you say, there's this kind of breakdown of commanders that are the enhancer or the engine and commanders that are the win con. That was more than I expected, that the commander itself, this is important to note, like if there were 3 or 4 cards involved, it may not have been the commander giving the overrun effect or doing something like that, but the commander might have made a huge board of tokens, or it might have drawn you a bunch of cards. Like there was some part of that turn where the commander was integral to the win, but it may not have been the win itself. You know what I mean?
Sure. That's interesting. I think like the conclusion of this is like, what can we take from this as a piece of conclusionary statement from the data is your commander is so important to your win, regardless of whether it's the setup or the last card you cast.
100%.
That is the importance of picking your commander. And even if we look back a couple of episodes ago to that choosing the wrong commander kind of thing, like for example, my Scorpion God deck, it's an aristocrat strategy, but the commander cares about neg 1 counters. So my commander is my card draw, is my value engine.
Yeah.
So it's still hyper important. So even if you're looking back on that episode and going, but you two said that I should pick the wrong commander for my deck, so I'm never casting it. No, it's still important. It's just filling maybe a different role than what you thought it would be.
A slightly less integral role.
Yeah.
The other thing I would take away from this, and this is like almost the counterpoint to that, is it's still extremely important in Commander to answer other people's commanders.
Yes.
You need
their
to
whole
have,
deck is built around it.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, when you're going around the table and you're looking at someone who looks close to the win, the thing that might cut them from the win most definitively is their commander. So, Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, even I've been seeing a lot of people playing more of the auras, like Darksteel Mutation and stuff like that.
Penrith's Transformation.
They remain really important. So continue to include those in your decks. And maybe if you're someone who's been playing 5, 6, 7 pieces of interaction, if you play more like 10 or 11 pieces of interaction in your deck, you may find you're stopping your opponents from winning more often and winning more as a result.
Well, I mean, like the other things that you got to think about, like, you have to make them have it sometimes.
Yeah.
And by removing their commander, that either says you have, like, for example, great example here is Azor the Lawbringer.
Yeah.
Azor the Lawbringer is Sphinx's Revelation on a stick when it attacks. So if you don't have other ways of gaining life or drawing a bunch of cards to, like, kill us with Psychosis Crawler, if you've got your commander on board, you might just have, like, a bunch of other stuff in your hand. If I get rid of Azor, you can't win on your next turn by just dumping a load of mana into Azor and killing us with Psychosis Crawler.
Yeah.
So I have to make you have the extra card draw in your hand.
Force me to have it.
Yeah, force
100%.
you to have it.
Yeah. There is one more piece of data that I tracked that I will not be covering in this episode because it deserves an episode of its own. It was, for those of you who have played me directly may know what it is because it's the one thing that I've been keeping in my game log that I haven't mentioned so far.
What?
It was something that I was tracking really closely. I'm not going to spoil it, but there's one particular thing I was tracking across all the games that I played, one aspect of how the game unfolded.
Oh, come on.
That I tracked the whole time. It's so interesting, the data that I got from it, that I would like to give it its own episode. It might take 3 or 4 episodes, or maybe 5 or 6 even before it comes out. But trust me, it'll be worth it. So,
oh man, I'm struggling to think of this. Am I going to have to wait or when the mics stop? Can you tell me?
I'll tell you when the mics stop.
Yes, the perks of being on the podcast. I guess. I'm excited for our episodes too.
There you go. Commander is a format with an enormous amount of variance, which is one of the things we love about it. But it can make it difficult to track your decks and how they fit in with the format at large. When we do consult the stats that we do have, we can see that the format is going to be all right. Players are winning a reasonable amount of the time, games are going for a reasonable length, win cons are working, and the pool of commanders is more diverse than it's ever been. So, Space Commanders, command received.
That was a colossal episode. What was it? We were going for like an hour and 20, something like that. Firstly, well done. Huge, huge episode for research wise.
Thank you. There was about 6 hours, I reckon, of just looking at stats
Number
and entering
crunching.
them and making pivot tables and all that kind of thing. So, to the listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What do you think of these stats, and do they align with your experiences playing casual Commander?
And you can follow us and talk to us on all our social platforms. Sorry, I was the other way with the fairies there. That was like a long pause. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, @GetCommanded on all platforms. But the best way to talk to us is by joining the Greensboro Commander Community's Discord channel. So jump in the show notes and join that. You can talk to us and other members of our play group that we've mentioned in this episode. But also follow us on Twitch, because Twitch is where our first stream will be. And because we're recording all of Out of Order at the moment, I can't remember if this episode's going to
be after when the stream happens.
Damn it. So the video on demand will be on YouTube. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel @GetCommanded.
And there will be more streams. So yeah, definitely follow us on Twitch to see those. And of course, we would be lost without our patrons. So don't forget to check out our Patreon page for more ways to support us directly. It's linked in the show notes. We'd like to say thank you to Stella Tam, Fuzzy, and Bottomless Potamus, our patrons who support us, and an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting, who supports us in the Space Commander tier. You are all the best.
You sure are. And Palms Off Gaming is also pretty damn good. They're actually sponsoring our podcast and make fantastic sleeves, deck boxes, and all that kind of stuff. And you can find them at palmsoffgaming.com.au/#GetCommanded, or use the discount code COMMANDED10 to get a huge 10% off on your purchase. You're also supporting the show when you do this. So COMMANDED10 at checkout, or /#GetCommanded is the URL to go to. No idea why there's a hashtag in there. I guess that the guys at POG were just like, you're going to be cool with a hashtag and stuff.
Shout out the socials.
Yeah, #GetCommanded. So yeah, go to their website, get yourself a nice set of like card sleeves, because I know that their new card sleeves have just gone live.
Come out.
They're called the blackout sleeves. These are the ones that Walt and I were given to test like ages ago and have a bit of a play around.
This is the sleeves that the Thursday Incarnate deck is currently in, and they're really sweet. I like shuffling them a lot.
Also, my Niv Mizzet CDH deck is in these sleeves. So if you want a bit of a, like, you know, I use these sleeves on my most expensive cards.
Trust them.
I trust them. And they're also great shuffle feel.
They're really nice to shuffle.
And they're really clean too. Like the blackout sleeves, they have a really strong back. So it's like a super strong color as well. They're printed really well. And the card, like it's got a black backing of the back of the sleeve. So it
makes all the colors pop really well.
Yeah, it's super cool. So palmsoffgaming.com. We'll try it again.
palmsoffgaming.com.au/#GetCommanded.
There we go. We did it.
Unified. That's all of the magic stuff, I reckon. So I reckon we should planeswalk out of here. Somewhere outside of magic, outside the world of Commander. Where are we planeswalking this week, James?
I would like to planeswalk and maybe time travel a little bit to Gallifrey, to London, England, is because that's every episode of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who,
for sure. Mainly because, I mean, everyone has heard about the Doctor Who Commander decks that have just come out, but I have been rewatching a couple of my old favorite episodes and actually specifically trying to show Theo, my partner, episodes that they have not seen to try and catch them up, because the 60th anniversary for Doctor Who is just around the corner, which in my opinion is the whole reason why Magic did this collab right now, is because the BBC is trying to like promote Doctor Who and get it back. But the main thing about this 60th anniversary special that I'm so hyped on is Russell T Davies is coming back as the showrunner.
I am so pumped. He's such a brilliant writer. He, for those who don't know, ran the show for series 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this was Christopher Eccleston's season, the 3 seasons of David Tennant, and then all the specials that came before Stephen Moffat took over as showrunner. These are all the seasons that I watched and that I absolutely adored.
These are, I mean, the pilot episode of Doctor Who, Rose, I watched like when it went live on BBC iPlayer while I was a little kid in Queensland, because my parents were obsessed with it and I was in an English family. So before it really got big in Australia, I was that one nerdy kid at primary school running around with a sonic screwdriver, and everyone was like, what is this weird show? And now it's huge in Australia and huge everywhere. I love Russell T Davies' writing. I think he's fantastic. I actually just watched a really, really great video essay about Doctor Who and women. and how women are represented in Doctor Who.
This is in my watch later. This is by a YouTuber called Verily Bitchy.
Yes.
She's great. I really enjoy her content.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. I really noticed why, because I stopped watching Doctor Who just after kind of like maybe partway through Peter Capaldi's run. He was the 12th Doctor.
So after Matt Smith, but before Jodie Whittaker.
But like I'd stopped enjoying the show quite a lot when Russell T Davies left.
Yeah.
And when Stephen Moffat took over. Nothing against Stephen Moffat as a writer. I think that he does a great job at writing episodes. Like, he's a very good individual episode writer. He wrote...
Some of the best episodes of Doctor Who during Russell T Davies' tenure as the showrunner were one-offs or two-offs by Stephen Moffat. Like, Empty Child, Blink.
Yep.
The Girl in the Fireplace.
All of these, like, some of my favorite episodes ever. But as a showrunner, I think he has trouble representing... specifically women, the companions of the Doctor, with like empathy and I don't know how to quite put it. The video essay was great. I might actually link it in the show notes.
Yeah, sure thing.
But the kind of attitude that Russell T Davies had towards the companion was a surrogate for the audience. Rose, especially in the first instance, we saw the Doctor through Rose's eyes. All our story followed Rose. Like, you know, we didn't see any secrets that the Doctor was keeping from Rose.
No.
It was all through Rose's eyes. Whereas when Moffat came on, I think that the show pivoted really strongly because instead of seeing the world through Amy Pond, we saw it through the Doctor. And Amy was just this kind of character. I mean, she's referred to as the girl that waited, right? And I think that the use of women in the shows recently, I'm like, I mean, even Jodie Whittaker's incarnation of the Doctor, I've not seen much of her, but this video essay put in like a really strong statement that Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is less memorable because she's not this like amazing Doctor, like, you know, no one can touch the Doctor, she's just out of this world kind of thing. She's much more equal playing field with her companions in those because there was, I think, 3 companions for most of her series.
Yeah, that's my recollection. Yeah.
So like it's more of like an even round table, but the Doctor is meant to be fantastical and kind of unreachable.
Yeah.
I found it interesting, but mainly I'm super hyped because Russell T Davies is coming back, who is brilliant.
He's fantastic.
And also, I'm going to be in London when it happens. I'm gonna be going to a cinema and watching the special happen with a bunch of other nerds in London.
Hype.
So excited.
It's going to be
so
great.
Excited.
I'm so excited for the next Doctor as well. I'm always...
Ncuti Gatwa.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Yes, thank you. Yeah, he's
really great actor.
So cool.
Yeah. Sex Education was a great show, mainly because of his performance.
He was probably my favorite character in the whole show.
For sure.
Yeah.
Most relatable, I think. Like, the most, like...
And just, like, most interesting. Like, the different aspects of him and the way that they unfolded across the show and in relation to the other characters were just, like... beautiful to watch. Yeah, really good television.
Yeah, really touching.
I can't wait for Russell T Davies to go. It's going to be great.
So excited. So excited.
So excited. Well, that's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander Players.